And we really want to make sure that we're able to listen and learn with and from each other. And so coming on camera helps with that. Being audible, if you can, helps with that. Making sure that we are engaging in the chat. We're going to be able to reach out to each and every one of you throughout this because we're all learning as we go through this process. And so with that being said, this is the second session, and my good friend Leslie is going to get into more of the detail as to why this is referred to as the LGBTQ and T session that we're going to be going through, and kind of what that all entails. But I would love to hear from Christine, who has been helping us to think about, design, and help put together this training series on behalf of you all. Christine, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carlton. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope it's not raining or snowing where you are. I have some snow coming down here in the borders of Delaware and Pennsylvania. So it's a little chilly. But, we welcome you all. We're trying to figure out how we as providers can give you the trainings that you're asking for and how to make it as accommodating as possible. We have a light group today. So I'm hoping that, in the next sessions, we can definitely pick up. I will follow along with Carlton and say, we would love to see your faces. That is one way we gauge participation here at the SABG team level. So feel free to open up your cameras. I do ask that you remain muted so we don't hear a lot of the background noise. And with that, I pass the baton over to Miss Leslie.
Before you get going, Leslie, I just wanted to share one more couple of thoughts. In terms of the participation, what we really would encourage is that we know that a number of you are very, very busy, and we're grateful that you're taking the time to be a part of this conversation. But what this was really designed for is it was designed for your teams and your staff, and those of your teams who may not have the opportunity to participate in some of the face-to-face training events, but it would be helpful if they were a part of this conversation. And so even if you aren't able to make it, if you can make sure that you're able to spread it, not only to the team members that are in your organization, but even to some of those that you serve, it is important that we engage as many as possible with respect to the conversations that we're trying to have on behalf of the state. And I saw that Shelley has joined us. Hello, Shelley. Thank you so very, very much for the leadership that you provide for all of this. Is there anything that you would like to share or state before I turn it over to Leslie to get us started in this second session?
Nope, I don't think so. I just want to thank everybody for being here. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. I am going to eat lunch, though, so I am going to turn my camera off for a minute, but I'm listening.
It might be what might be going on for others as well. So we started off with an Eagles fight song, and we are going to continue on in that same vein and same spirit. And I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Leslie Dill to take us forward. Leslie, go ahead, and you got it.
I'll just say that y'all can feel free to have your cameras on while you eat, because if I wasn't presenting, I would be eating. And I actually just dipped off right before this presentation to munch on a pickle. My last name's Dill, so like what else would I possibly eat, right? But pickles. But yeah, I love pickles. So thank you for the wonderful introductions, Carlton and Christine. Thank you both for having me. I'm so excited to be here for part 2 of the series. I am coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where it is yucky rainy and 53 degrees outside, so maybe a little warmer than Delaware. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and what I have learned about sharing my screen when I am on the server is that I actually have to share it, put it in presentation mode, stop the share, and then go back into here. Okay, here we are. So I can't see a lot of y'all, so I'm going to be depending on Carlton to help with any type of chat, or if we see any hands raised, that would be lovely, Carlton.
You got it.
Okay, perfect. So what you all may notice about today is that I have intentionally changed it from what you may be used to, which is LGBTQ. Actually, whenever Carlton and I were meeting today, oh no, my watch is talking to me. When we were talking earlier today, Carlton's like, was that like a typo or something? And I'm like, no, it is not a typo. I did that very intentionally. And the reason for it is that LGB, for the most part, is sexual identity, sexual orientation, as you may have heard it. Queer is something that can be used interchangeably between these things. And then trans is more of a gender identity, gender expression term. So I very intentionally separated those things, and we will look more at that, deeper at that, I guess I should say, as we move forward. I also very much want everybody to get what they want to get out of all the presentations that I do. So if at any time I do not stand on ceremony, if you have any questions, you want to pop in the chat, and Carlton can absolutely interrupt. If anybody wants to come off mute with any thoughts that you're having, that is also totally fine. I'm not sure how many of you, can you drop in the chat if you were here for the last presentation or if this is your first time? That'll help me know more of what's going to be, where I should focus for this first little part. Second time, here last time. All right, yay. Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time introducing myself. Amy, you missed out. Well, I'm glad that you're here today. But what I say is that, like, wherever you're at now in your professional life, what you bring to that is your lived experience. So you bring things that you've experienced, people that you've worked with, situations that you've been with, and all of that shapes who you are now and how you got to this particular point. And also the way that you think, like how you think, the way that you think. And so all of these things contributed to the way that I think, the way that I think. But I think a lot of that just had to do with my work on UNC Charlotte's campus with the LGBTQ community and with those students. I was at UNC Charlotte teaching for 12 years. And although I do nonprofit work now for my full-time position, I very much, my passion is in education, and my master's is in education, and I love teaching, whatever the topic is. And I typically find myself teaching some of the more, I'm going to say taboo, although I don't really like taboo, maybe marginalized topics that are tougher to talk about and a lot of people don't really love talking about. That's where I love being. And I use she, her pronouns. I think I know I said that last time, but I want to go ahead and point that out for this time as well. Something that's really important at the organization that I work for now, and just in my personal life, just because of my own ancestry. My sixth great grandfather was running Fox Green, and he was from Cherokee Nation. So I just want to recognize today that I am coming from you all, from Sugary and Catawba lands. And there's a really cool, I'll drop it in the chat whenever we get off here, but there's a really great site where you can go to and actually look to see what native land you currently live and work on, if you're not familiar with that. But when we think about equity and equality and pushing us all forward, that's something that you can actually do. And this is actually in my email signature at my current work. And I actually really love that because I love being at an organization where we're allowed to be progressive and also come to work as our authentic selves all the time. So that's exciting. Since a lot of the things that we talk about are, I would say, like deeper and tougher and heavier topics, I always like a little levity in the beginning. I think last time we got together, it was National Llama Day. Today, it is National Fish Taco Day. So if anybody would like to drop recommendations in the chat for where to get the most delicious fish tacos in Delaware, I'm sure your fellow participants would very much appreciate that. If
How do
you're
you
in the,
find these
go
things?
ahead.
How do
Huh?
you find these things? I'm just like National Fish
Okay,
Taco.
so I will drop that
Like
in the
fish
chat
taco.
for y'all too
Jeez.
whenever we get to a point. Actually, whenever I play the little video clip in a little bit, I'll drop these things in the chat. But I found this awesome website that you can go to, and every single day of the year, I mean, there was probably 10 different days that were highlighted, and I just picked National Fish Taco Day because who doesn't love a fish taco? Fish tacos are the bomb. But there is, if you're ever in the Charlotte area, there is a place in North Davidson. North Davidson is affectionately known as Noda to Charlotte folks. Noda is basically like a little borough, a little neighborhood of Charlotte. And in Noda is a place called Cabo Fish Taco. And Cabo Fish Taco has delicious all the things, but especially, I mean, with a name like Cabo Fish Taco, you have to have good fish tacos, right? So today's National Fish Taco Day, so go eat all your fish tacos. Oh, hold on. There's something really cool in the chat I just saw while I stopped. Oh yeah, and yes, I was a blocker for the Charlotte Roller Derby. If y'all are ever in, I've sort of not been doing well. We're on break from COVID for a very long time, but come see us, Charlotte Roller Derby in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you're ever here. But congratulations to Miss Jarnay on the birth of her son last week. Yeah, that's in the chat. So congratulations. The fact that you're on this call right now after just giving birth is wow. I've not given birth, but I've seen videos, and I'm glad that you're I'm glad that you're here to be with us. Okay, let me get out of that. Okay, here we go. Getting into the meat and taters, if you will. So just a brief review. This is a 3-part series, and the series was created with the intention of building on all of the pieces. And so I know that at least one person who's here today was not able to join us during the last session. And so what we did during the last session was just really talk about, well, we talked about, and we're going to do a review in just a second, so I'll hold off on that. But the goal was to talk about the importance of cultural humility. And then the session today, of course, is the LGBTQ and T. And then the next one, we will be talking about the intersection of all of those things coming and melding together. So we're going to talk about how the cultural competence, the cultural humility, that we prefer that term, comes in and intersects with LGBTQ youth and also substance use disorder, and the importance of the language that we use in these spaces and how they can very much bring people into services or push them away. We're also going to look at some specific data around disproportionate effects of substance use disorder on LGBTQ youth and probably some other marginalized groups as well. So if you are not, Carlton, do you know off the top of your head? I know it's mid-February that I want to say it's February 15th.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the next time that we will be together is February 15th. It's also a Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel, if you will. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, if that's copyrighted or not, but okay.
I say it all.
So, okay, good. And I will be sharing this presentation in a PDF format with Carlton, who can then share it with all of you. Any links that I use in this presentation, I will also share. So I say all that because I'm a person who, if I'm taking notes or trying to write things down, I often disengage from the conversation. And I don't want that for any of y'all. I want you to be as engaged as you are able to be in the conversation. And so don't feel like you have to take any notes because you will get all of this. But can anybody who was here from the last time tell me the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility and why the differences in that language are so important?
You can either put in a chat or you can unmute. And Leslie, we have about 4 or 5 folks that weren't with us last time.
Oh, okay. Well, in the interest of time, then I'm just going to carry on and I'll just answer the question for you. So the word cultural competence is a little older than the word cultural humility. And as we think about language, language is absolutely ever changing. And we want to recognize that when we're talking about cultural humility. So the word itself, competence, really lends itself to having a binary, this or that, right or wrong, black and white. You either get it or you don't get it. And what we know about cultural topics is that it is not that. We are all always learning. Language is always changing. And so by saying cultural humility, that gives us the opportunity to say, like, I might mess this up, but I'm trying. And that's really what's important at the end of the day. You see down several bullets down, it says intent matters. The intention that is felt by people who are in space with you, they feel your intention. So even if you might say a word wrong, or you're using a term that I always use my mama, rest her, as an example, because I tried to tell her many times that using the term colored people, although at one time that was considered to be politically correct and respectful and you trying to show respect, it is no longer. Now, up until the day that she died 2 years ago, she still thought in her mind that that was the right thing to say. And so, but her intent was there, that, you know, there was no malice, you know, she wasn't trying to be derogatory, like, you know, I guess you can't always teach an old dog new tricks. So, privilege, we talked about privilege. If you weren't here last time, one of my favorite parts of my current job is getting to go to crisis intervention trainings with first responders and talk about privilege. It's also one of the hardest jobs. And so let me just set the stage really quickly. I was in Cabarrus County, that's Concord, just outside of Charlotte, on Monday. And I was with a group of police officers. There were 18 police officers. 17 were white men that looked to me to be cisgender, heterosexual, white men. And then you add in a badge on top of it, and there really is no greater privilege when you talk about working with the community. And so there's always that power differential and that perceived dynamic. It actually not even perceived. It is a power dynamic. And just so being in those spaces. Oh, the last person, the 18th person, was a white woman. So there were no other colors but white in that room. And I'm not saying that there weren't other cultures or races, but what I'm saying is that they looked to be this color. And so although, you know, someone may be from South America and may speak a different language, if when they're walking down the street, they appear to be white, that gives them privilege. And so having those conversations is one of the hardest parts of my job, but also one of my favorite parts of the job. So, you know, talking about those things is important. And then, of course, language matters. That's what we've been talking about. And also giving us the opportunity in our spaces, in our workspaces, in our home spaces, to talk about language. These opportunities, if you look for them, present themselves very often. My partner's kid, who we have custody of, came home yesterday talking about language that students were using in his class. And it gave us an opportunity as a family to talk about the language that he heard, what his perception was of that, how he felt about that. You know, just there's always opportunities to have these conversations. Okay, I'm going to stop share for just a second because I want to see your faces. So the word queer, okay, when I say the word queer, what comes to mind for you? And feel free to drop it in the chat. Is queer a word that is a slur word, if you will, in your mind? And I do think that it's sort of, it's kind of, what I recognize is that you get different answers depending on your generation when I say the word queer. But I like to have sort of a word recognition in this moment because I use the word queer.
Yeah, I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
I grew up in Rehoboth Beach, and so it was just surrounded by people that at that time, I'm 47. I had friends that worked in the restaurant business that they called each other queer, but it wasn't something that I felt comfortable saying.
Oh, yes.
So
I'm going to make a note of that because I got something to say about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I had too many glasses of wine, maybe I might have said something or maybe asked about it, but honestly, it wasn't a word that I used.
Amy, did you have something you wanted to add also?
The only other thing I was going to add is that I am aware, well, I have been made aware that it is no longer a slur term, but there was a time period in my life where it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Which dates that, yes, I'm 42.
I'm 40. I'm right there with you. Christine?
I will say, being, the generation that I think most of us are on is, queer to me growing up was anybody that was termed gay.
Okay.
It was kind of the slang, you're queer.
Yeah.
But now I see it more, and this is why I like this class so much, is because I see it just as someone's sexual orientation that isn't what I was raised as typical. So they fall into that broad category of queer.
And I just
Okay.
want to add one more thing. I know that I didn't call lesbians queer. I called them lesbians when I was growing up. So
Okay.
I think I had an association with men when it came to queer.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, Valerie has her hand up.
Yeah. Is it Valeria?
Valeria? I'm sorry, forgive me, Valeria.
Yeah, it's in Spanish it's Valeria. But
Yeah, I was gonna do
Valeria.
that, but my R's don't sound like that. But I
Yeah,
do.
I know.
I got you. Okay.
It's okay. Well, I'm 27, so for me, queer has never been a slur. Like, honestly, this is the first time that I hear about that. For me, queer is
Wow.
like a sexual identity in it. And I have queer friends and I've asked them how they identify and they say queer. And for me, it's always been not a negative word.
So to the generational point, I will say yes. And I have friends who are my mother's age who are gay or however they may identify, and they hear that word and it's immediately like, ouch. Like, because, and it, again, it's about the intent too. Could you still use the word queer to hurt someone? Absolutely. Sure you could, like, depending on the context of how you were using it and how you were speaking to someone. And so to Holly's point, I will say too, and I wrote this down, using certain words when you identify within a certain group. So to your point, there are words that are used within certain groups of people that are only okay to use by people that identify within that certain group of people by those people, period. It's not okay for anybody else to say those words, or I'm sure that you all can think of some words like that culturally. But even when I think about in terms of substance use disorder, which relates very closely to where we're going to go in the next series, I always say substance use disorder, someone who's in active use, those kinds of words, because I am not in that community of people. However, when I work with those people, and if I'm at an AA meeting, for instance, for work or whatever it is, I hear them refer to themselves as addicts. And I would never refer to someone as an addict, because I would just say it's someone who's actively using substances or not, or whatever. Or when they say, I've been clean for this number of years. When you use the term clean, you're assigning a value to a behavior. And we always want to not assign a value to a behavior if at all possible. So they're not clean or dirty because they're either actively using or they're not actively using. But I wouldn't tell someone with lived experience who is sober or actively using what language to use about their own experience. That's not something I can do. But what I can do is tell people who don't identify with those within those communities why certain language is more appropriate than other language. Does that make sense? Okay, super. So when it comes to the word queer, and I will tell you all why I use the word queer. So the word queer is intentionally ambiguous. So if I go up to you, and Carlton, I'm going to use you because I see you. If I go up to Carlton and I'm like, hey, Carlton, my name's Leslie. I'm a lesbian. Okay. Carlton is immediately like, okay, she just gave me some info. I know that she has sex with women. So Leslie's a lesbian. Like, that's what she is. Got it. Okay.
I'm
So
following,
Leslie
I'm
has
following.
been moved into the lesbian box over here. If I introduce myself and I say, hey, my name's Leslie, I'm queer. You're like, huh? Like, what, because it could be a lot of things. And instead of giving you the power to put me in this box and say, okay, Leslie's a lesbian and that's all she'll ever get to be, we're going to stick her right over there and know that she don't like nobody else. She just likes women. That's where she's at. End it. I can say, hey, my name's Leslie and I'm queer. And it's like, well, what is queer? And it's like, well, you know, I'm currently in a partnership with a woman who I love very much. And I think she's fantastic. And also I've occasionally been known to date men. It kind of varies back and forth. And, you know, maybe I'm polyamorous, or maybe I'm demisexual, or maybe and I know that, you know, some of you may not know what all those words mean, but the point is just to have one identity and to not recognize the fact that it can be on a continuum is doing a disservice to people. And so I like the word queer because it gives the power back to the person to identify all their identities. And also when I was at UNC Charlotte forever and a day, the students were like, Leslie, we want you to use the word queer. Like, just say queer. We're trying to embrace it. We're bringing it back. We want to take the power from the people who tried to hurt us, and we're using queer, and we want you to too. What I have noticed though is that it's important for me to do this sort of disclaimer in the beginning of presentations, because if I don't have this conversation inevitably on feedback forms, people are like, I didn't like how you used that word. So I want to ask for permission in this group, because we've had this conversation. Are y'all okay with me saying queer? I use them interchangeably. Sometimes I'll say LGBTQ, sometimes I say queer. It's just however it comes out. But just so y'all know, my intent is to be exclusive or inclusive and not exclusive. That's it. Okay. Thanks, y'all. That's my little disclaimer. Okay. So that is why we use that word.
Leslie, I'm so glad that you said that. I just put in the chat that it seemed as someone that's outside of that community, that my observation of that word was that, you know, it used to be used for harm, but that the community itself decided to take it, reclaim it, and assert it with their power from that community in the way they want, as other communities have done with other words, right? And so that's at least from one perspective, one outside view, and I was just wondering how true that might be.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I definitely appreciate all of your interaction in the chat and your willingness to come off mute and not leave me out here in the world all by myself.
We together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So in terms of expectations for today, if you have any particular expectations, I would welcome you to throw those in the chat or unmute. I definitely, if you have questions, if there are things that you want to share, please feel free to unmute and share those things, because I really want this to be interactive and I want you to get from it what you want to get from it. I used to tell, my background is in sexual and reproductive health. And I always tell students when I go into rooms, and I actually still do this on occasion, that if I'm talking about something and you're like, I don't really care about that, or that's not answering the question I had for today, then take the conversation in a different direction. It can go, you know, I'm not saying that I'll have all the answers, but I'm saying I've been doing this for 20 years now. And so if I don't have the answer, I definitely know where to find the answer. So don't hold back if there's expectations that you have or things that you want to ask. So our learning outcomes for today, we're definitely going to break down the differences between gender identity, gender expression, sexual identity, sex assigned at birth, and then talk about how they are all very different. The reason why I separated it out into LGBTQ and T is because when I have these conversations with, it really doesn't matter what group of people it is. If we're talking about lesbians, people are like, oh, okay, lesbians. Yeah, I got that. Okay, we're good to go on that. Gay, we're good to go on that. Bisexual, I don't really think they exist, but here we are. So yes, I get that. We'll keep it moving. A lot of the confusion, if you will, and lack of understanding comes when you throw in the T. And so I really want to take a minute today to talk about the T portion of it and what that means and why it's confusing. And I'm going to give y'all a couple of lived experience examples of things that have happened. And so we're going to talk about that. And I hope that's something that you all would be interested in. And we're also going to identify at least 3 ways that you can show members of this community that you are supportive of diversity without saying it. This was something that was supposed to come at the end of part 1, but we had done it for only an hour. Could you imagine? Because that means I would have 23 minutes left right now, and there's no way we would get over that because we're just now getting the learning outcomes. So we decided to change it to 90 minutes with the intention of being able to get to the majority of the things that we wanted to get to. I'm looking in here. Okay, so Christine says, I think for me, it's the QT plus. Yeah, something really exciting that I chair a task force in Charlotte and surrounding, and in March, we are having a guest speaker that we're hosting as the task force that we're hosting. Their name is Rue, and they identify as Native American Two-Spirit, and they live on the Catawba Indian Reservation. And as long as I've been doing this work, I have never been with somebody in their presence for a presentation to listen to them speak about all their identities and the differences of being on a reservation and not, but around being Native American Two-Spirit. And just the things that I know about that identity and having someone come speak, we've already picked like because we're doing it totally in person. And so we've got like this very large venue because I feel like after I send out the invitations to 10 counties that if there's other people who feel like I do and that like I've never had the opportunity to hear someone talk about a Native American Two-Spirit identity, that it's probably going to be well attended. At least I hope it will be well attended. Okay, so I'm going to share this with y'all, but I'm actually going to stop share and then share a website. I found a lot of really great websites and doing research specifically for Delaware around this topic. And so this one is from the Williams Institute. So I'm going to stop share for a moment and pull up my other screen. Oh, I'm so excited. So I'm going to share now. So this is the Williams Institute. And you can actually go to this website and look up any state that you like, but I love that it has infographics, and it'll also in certain instances show you how your particular state compares to the nation. So here you can see that this is Delaware specific, that 4.5% of the population identifies, and so this is self-identifying as LGBTQ. Now, as I was looking at this, and this is just from my own research and what I know from my own education, is that 4.5% is still super low. That actually the estimation is that at least 10% of the population would identify in some way within the LGBTQ alphabet soup, if you will. So the fact that there's like some of these areas, I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Why do you think that some of these areas are so low? I mean, I think I have some reasons why I think that they would be low compared to other states, but even the states that are really open to identifying within the queer community, still 4.5% and above. I mean, that it's still very low. It's very low, but we won't stay on that for long. I really love the infographics on this page. So this is a good spot to go if you need any kind of data around queer identities in Delaware. I thought it was really cool. 35% of people who identified as LGBTQ are also raising children. It looks like the female percentage is larger than the male percentage that identified. And
May I ask
then
you a question, Shelley?
sure.
So this data that you're collecting, which I'm finding in what I'm working with now, where is it collected and who all is actually showing up to, I don't know, share?
That's a great question. Like I said, this is from the Williams Institute. And so I don't know how they actually gather their data. I would need to look more. The Gallup, so this is the Gallup data. So I don't know how they actually send this survey out. And that may have a lot to do. Actually, you know what we'll do? To your point, since I can't answer your question of how they gather their data, what I'm going to do is share a different screen with somewhere that I know more about. Okay. So this one is actually called the Movement Advancement Project. And I think you'll find this interesting if you've never seen this before. So the Movement Advancement Project is looking at, let me, hold on. I know I'm like, I keep moving all over the place, but this is important. So the Movement Advancement Project, and this is the movement around LGBTQ identities, and it looks at the United States as a whole. And it looks at several different measurements in the state around services, laws, populations, all of those things. And it gives your state a rating, a score, if you will. And this is actually, this middle of the medium is actually, I mean, it's a pretty decent score for Delaware. And I'm going to share the website with you because it's got some really neat stuff. But this one, I know where these things come from. So what I noticed was that they actually got some of their stuff from the census as well as the Gallup and Williams. So maybe to answer your question, that needs to be looked at closer, and I can look at that closer to see, you know, I mean, obviously for the census, I know how that data is gathered, but for the Gallup and Williams data collection, I don't know how they gather that information, but it looks like that, you know, legitimate sites are actually using that as, I'm going to say good data, but I don't normally like to say good data because that's assigning a value, but legitimate data, I'll say. So I'm not sure about their collection strategies, but if other known sites are using it, then they must be doing it in an effective way anyways. That would be my assumption. So I'm going to say, let me look into that. And I will also share that with Carlton to send out to everyone.
Leslie, two things. One, it's interesting to me that both of these sites actually share very, very similar numbers and similar results. And so we're seeing the same numbers. So there seems to be some consistency in whatever the data collection methodology might be around that just kind of lends itself to the credibility of the data and the information that they're showing and using, even though we may recognize that it might be incomplete in some ways, some shapes, some forms, some fashions, and there are definitely probably limitations that they acknowledge. But the other thing is the fact that I'm looking at where and how they show Delaware and how, like, what a useful tool this could potentially be for those of us who are looking and interested, at least as a place to start these conversations.
1000%. Anytime you're looking at LGBTQ data, there are limitations. There's not a lot of questions that are asked. Like, I would say that the vast majority of the demographic data that's been collected around LGBTQ identities in surveys has really only started in the past decade. And it's like the more of us that are saying, like, we need to be collecting this data. And it's hard. It's hard on the national level. It's almost harder at the local level. And I say that because I've been talking to people very consistently about collecting this data, even in the schools, to help bring in funds and money, because we know that these students are disproportionately affected by access and homelessness and suicide and all the things. But to get that money, we need the data. And to get the data, we need to have schools that allow us to ask the questions. And I'm not sure about Delaware, but in our area, even though it's Charlotte and it's a more progressive city, it's still very conservative. And, you know, asking, you know, questions to the students, it's still basically one of the school districts that I won't name said, you know, we were sending out the youth drug survey last year, and the organization that regularly sends out the youth drug survey had called me up, and we spent, I remember because I was driving to the beach and I was on the phone with the executive director of this organization for 2 hours talking through, what questions do we want to ask of these students? How do we want to ask them? How do we want to word them? You know, how many options do we want to give? And we put together this whole section of demographic data collection. And when it came down to it, the school district said, you will either send out this survey without those questions, or we will not allow you to send out the survey, period. And obviously at that point, we want the drug survey to go out, so we don't have any choice but to not ask the questions. And so to your point, it's really difficult to be able to, you know, find really great LGBTQ data. And so that's why I was really excited to find these sites. Another thing that I think is really wonderful about this site in particular is that it lets you look at laws and policies and see what the laws and policies are that are in place for people within the LGBTQ community. And then you can look and compare to other states. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there are a good many non-discrimination laws in Delaware that aren't in other places. So anyways, you can spend some time, but I wanted to share this site with you all again. It's called the Movement Advancement Project. They do something similarly that I saw where they compare universities and institutions of higher education, where they compare them, and universities and schools are regularly given a score. And I know students who have chosen their university out of a short list based on their score from this site that says this is all the supports that they have for LGBTQ people and all of the things. I saw Christine shared. Christine, what is that?
We're trying to put the link. We're going to make sure that we have the links for both of the sites before we
Okay, good.
in the session.
Okay, good.
And Leslie, before you move on, could you just explain, is that what the continuum chart or the chart,
The meter?
the meter, yes, is that what the
Yeah.
meter indicated when it indicated Delaware as being medium, which was like
Yeah.
very right past fair
And
and next to good, like in terms of policies associated with working on behalf of the LGBTQ community? Is that what that
Correct.
refers?
Correct. It means it's a better than decent place for LGBTQ people that they may want to live there. And I think more to that point is, you know, when I was looking at that original map and it had the 4.5% or higher, and Delaware was one of those states, what that tells me, because it's self-reported, is that for some reason the people in that state feel a little safer to say that they are queer. And I think that that's also evidenced by the score, because that high side of medium tells me that there's enough laws in place that people feel safe-ish to come out and say, like, hey, I'm queer, I have a wife, I have kids, you know, because like in North Carolina, I can already tell you, I don't even know, I haven't even looked, maybe I'll look, but North Carolina absolutely does not have a middle medium score. I can tell you Delaware has exceeded us, because I know that there's less laws in place, that a lot of times students talk about lack of visibility of other people that have identities like them in the schools. It's not that we don't have queer teachers, it's that queer teachers don't feel safe identifying as queer in our schools. Because in North Carolina, you can still be fired just because of your sexual orientation. So because of that, you don't get the representation, you know, and that's really hard, because then you have all these queer students who feel like there's no queer adults, you know, because they don't see them. And I think that can be true for representation in a lot of ways, you know, whether we're talking about, you know, masculine educators, male identified educators, Black, brown educators, you know, it's seeing those people that look like you in those spaces. Holly, I'm going to need your dog to stay on the camera the rest of it. It's actually really good that I can't see everybody's little box while I'm teaching, because I would be way distracted by that cute little bundle of fur. Okay. Okay, so moving on, and I actually have all of these. I can just copy and paste all of these once we get a little further in. This is one more site that I want to share with y'all, nohomophobes.com. And talking about language, homosexual is no longer a word that we use. And I know that I said that last time, but for all of y'all that are here this time that weren't here last time, homosexual is a very scientific, very researchy, very clinical word that the queer community has decided we don't use that word anymore. It's not our word. We didn't create that word. It was used to talk to and about us in a way that we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to consent to. So that is why that we don't use homosexual anymore. However, this particular website called nohomophobes.com is one that I feel like y'all need to see. And I want y'all to know why. So this is nohomophobes.com. This has been around for several years. Let me see how long it's been around. Not sure. Can y'all see that? Did the screen change for you also?
Yes.
Okay, so July 5th of 2012 is when this was actually created. And what it does is it looks at several different words and phrases, and it looks at them on the Twitter platform. So this is just today, January 25th, 2023, up until this time. This is how many times these words and phrases have been used on Twitter today. And then you have last week and all time. What's most interesting about the all time is that if you actually break this down and look at it, if you zoom in, you can actually see spikes depending on what's going on politically. So if you remember the, oh gosh, it was Proposition 8. You know, the bathroom bill, oh gosh, the bathroom bill, it definitely spiked for that, where they were talking about people being able to use the restroom of the gender that they identify as. But you can go look at this later, but I bring this up because this is what our kids are this is the language that they see every single day. And you know, even just today already 1,600 times the F word has been used. And I call it the F word because that is not a word that I will even say. Now, the other F word, I use that multiple times a day, all day long. I allow my kids to use it. It's fine. As long as you are using a word that is not in direct opposition and ugly to someone else's identity and the way that they live and move through this world, you can use it. Our kids can say F-U-C-K, they're 13 and 15. But if they said the F-A-G word, life as they know it would end. And they know that. Like, they know it. Just like some other words that we can think of. Those are not okay words. Shit is fine in my house, but there are definitely words that are not fine, and that is one of them. And so when we talk about language, using language, your intent matters. And is it derogatory to another person's existence and the way they move through this world? Because if it is, that is not a word that should be coming out of your mouth. Again, there are exceptions. If you have lived experience in a certain group, in a certain community, and you are with those people, but to not have that lived experience and to not have moved through the world in the way that they have, you have not earned the right to use that word. And so that's those are the conversations that we have in our home. That's the conversation we had with our kid yesterday about why certain words are okay and certain words are not okay. And again, I think that the school system would disagree with me, because our kid, I can tell you right now, would be more in trouble for using the FU word than the FA word. And I'm not okay with that. Needless to say, the teacher and the principal got an email from me yesterday. Okay, so that's that part. I'm not going to go through all of this. I think that most of you know most of these words. I will say that transsexual is definitely an outdated term and not one that we use. A very easy way to use trans is to literally say trans, just trans. Sometimes you'll see trans with a little asterisk after the S, and it's because trans identities are sort of under this whole umbrella of just gender identity, gender fluidity, non-binary, all of the things. Queer is just that very encompassing term that we talked about. I'm going to tell y'all, since I see that y'all like dogs, or at least one person does and I do, I'm going to tell y'all a really cool story in just a second about intersex. And then asexual is just really basically they don't have sexual attraction to other people. Like, they're just not really interested in sex. They're not sexually attracted. There's also demisexual. Some people identify as demisexual. That's not listed on here, but it's basically like they need to have some sort of deeper connection with someone to feel any sexual attraction. And then pan is a form of sexual attraction to where there's not really a binary or a box, or they could be they could be attracted to someone who's trans and brown and short, or they could be cisgender, tall, whatever. There's no restrictions on that. I'm going to tell y'all a quick story. It's semi-quick, but it's about the intersex, this idea of intersex and the definition of intersex. So my sister has a dog. It's a black pug, and she has had him since he was itty bitty. And if you think about the anatomy of a pug, so the first time I saw this, actually any pup really, if you think about it, they're like these little fat butter balls, and they have like these like little round fat bellies. And for some reason, when they're little boy dogs, it almost looks like their penis is kind of like where their belly button would be. Like, it's more like up on their belly. And then like as they get older, it kind of shifts back. Like, that's just the natural progression of their dog bodies. So she brings this little puppy over, and I see this puppy and I'm like, gosh, like looking, he's on his belly, and I'm like, gosh, his penis is in kind of a weird spot. I didn't say nothing because I didn't want my sister to lose her mind, because this was her first child. So I was like, I'm not going to say anything about this dog, whatever. So then she takes the dog to the vet for his shots, and, they talk about getting him neutered and all the things. Well, the vet tells her his testicles have not descended yet. So we're going to have to wait maybe another month. You can bring him in and we'll do the neuter. Fine. So then she takes him in again, and the vet comes in. She feels for the testicles. She doesn't feel any. She's like, hey, can I take him to the back so we can, do like sort of a deeper dive? And my sister calls me from the vet waiting room and she's like, I don't know, like, I don't think he has any testicles. And I'm like, well, that happens sometimes, dogs, kids, whatever, they don't have testicles, whatever. So she gets off the phone with me. The vet comes back into the room and she's like, how is he? Is he okay? And the vet says, well, he might be a she. And my sister is like beside herself. Like she doesn't even, so I get this call, she's going home and she's like, Leslie, the vet said he might be a hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite. This is a clinically educated doctor of veterinary medicine, and you don't know that there's no mammals that can be hermaphrodites, first of all. Second of all, the term is intersex. Intersex refers to ambiguous genitalia in general. It could be chromosomal differences, but I was all in my feelings. An example of a hermaphrodite would be a starfish. Starfish have male, female functioning. They can get themselves pregnant without anyone else's help. There are no mammals on the planet who can do that. Okay, so let's just put that out there. Hermaphrodite is a derogatory term. We use intersex. So she takes the dog back to the vet. They're going to do his neuter. They cut him in the back, area, the scrotum where the testicles should be. There's no testicles. So then they decide they're going to spay this dog, neuter and spay. So they cut the dog open and they find that he has a uterus. He also has testicles where the ovaries should have been. Okay. So the greatest part of this whole story, let me tell y'all, because this is funny. The greatest part is that she had already named this dog before all of this happened, of course. The dog's name, the dog's name is Macho Man Randy Savage. Macho is this dog's name. And she says his name's Macho. He identifies as a boy. His penis is referred to as a pupus. It's not functioning. It would have never functioned for the intended penis purpose, even if he had testicles. I tell y'all this story because this happens in nature all the time, but it's not something that we talk about. Therein lies the problem. Also, if you're a parent, right, and you go in, I've never been pregnant, so this is not my lived experience, but you decide that you want to find out the sex of your baby, right? So you find out you want to find out the sex of your baby, and you go in and they look on the scan and they're like, we can't tell. Not really sure. It looks like there might be a little piece of maybe a penis, but also we see that. Okay. And then you're scrolling through your social media and all you see is gender reveal parties left and right. Your family's calling you up. What are you having? And it's like you only have two options. You have to pick boy or girl. And I will say also that to call it a gender reveal party is actually inaccurate. It's a sex reveal party. We're talking about what do you have between your legs when you come out? That's the reveal, because we don't know gender until later. And I've been doing this long enough that I can laugh. I saw this man on Instagram the other day. He was like, why are y'all even having these gender reveal parties when you're just going to let them pick what they want to be when they get to be 12 anyways? It was hysterical. But it's also, like that to his point, it is a sex reveal party. And so you understand why people are hesitant. Nobody could ever say, hey, my kid's intersex. Even though the estimation is that 1 in 100 every live births has some intersex characteristics, 1 in 100. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have ambiguous genitalia. They could not find out until they're supposed to start puberty, and then they don't, or they try to get pregnant and they can't. Or I'm not saying that all infertility issues stem from being intersex. That is not the fact, but that sometimes these things aren't found until much later. And so the frustrating part is that a lot of people feel like these identities are just happening now. Like for some reason we're being inundated with all of this stuff, and it's like, no, as a society we have just now gotten to this progressive, if you can even call it progressive, place where we can name these things and talk about these things out loud in a space where we're not going to be persecuted. And so there's all this new language that's coming out all the time. And the reason why it's coming out is not new identities, but new language to go with things that we've never been able to talk about before. And it's really exciting. The people who are least excited about it, again, are the people with the most privilege. So white, cis, Christian, straight men. That's the hardest people in the world to talk to any of these things about. That's it. That's the top of the heap. And I was literally surrounded by those people on Monday morning talking about privilege. But, you know, and I also tell them the story about Macho Man Randy Savage, the pug, because that was my real life experience. That happened. It happened. And I still love Macho very much. He's my nephew. He identifies as a male, even though he had a uterus. Okay, moving on. I hope that story helped y'all in some kind of way, even if it was just a little giggle, because I giggle every single time. Okay, so this is also something that I like to bring up, and this, if you've heard of Alfred Kinsey and all of the beautiful research that he did, Alfred Kinsey was the first sexual health researcher who ever did research around sort of this idea of varying different sexual identities. And so even though I don't use that term, and y'all know this, if you look on the left hand side, this is the legitimate Kinsey scale, so I'm going to use the language that he used. On the left side, you have exclusively heterosexual, and then on the right side, you have exclusively homosexual. What we know is that people who are exclusively one or the other are the minority. The vast majority of mammals are somewhere in the middle. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're sexually attracted to your same sex or gender, or you could be, or maybe you're like, yeah, they're hot, but I don't want to be in a committed relationship with, whatever it is. I'm just saying to be exclusively one or the other is not the majority. The majority is that there's some kind of gray area. And the gray area is an important thing to talk about, because from a very young age, we are taught binary things. It's this or that, left or right, red or black, whatever. The way that I like to think about it, I don't know if y'all remember, but y'all remember those little plastic cubes, and they open up and the kids dump the shapes out, and then they put in these holes that will only fit that shape. That's all you can choose, is that one shape. It's the only one that will fit. But we as humans, that's not us. And just because I say that, like, I'm a lesbian today doesn't mean that I can't identify as bi tomorrow or straight the next day. A physical action with another orientation. Society has sort of told us that a little differently. And the example that I would give is that me, if I said that I had sex with women before, I'm totally accepted to hop back over onto the heterosexual side and be with a man. And if anything, they're just going to be like, oh, well, yeah, that's hot. You know, my girl's been with you. That's society. If a man says that he's been with another man, that is like, in a lot of people's minds, like there's no going back. Like that's it's an activity. It is not a definition of your sexual orientation. It's not a definition of those things. It's literally just an activity. But the way that society views it, and I used to always love having these conversations with people at the university, because they would be like, well, they say, or society says, and I'm like, you are society. You have the capacity to make this change. You can do this. Like you can change the narrative. You know, when they were talking about body counts and number of partners, I'm like, what number is too many? And they're like, well, it depends on if you're a guy or a girl. And I'm like, does it? I don't really know that it does. This is the gender unicorn. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've sort of been having these conversations this whole time. But what you see here is that everything is on a continuum. What you'll hear sometimes people in the queer community call it is being fluid. So you can move from one thing or the other. Sex assigned at birth is not on a fluid continuum, because that is just, you came out, they looked in between your legs and they said, yep, you're a boy, or you're a girl, or you're intersex. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's easier to cut something off than to build something. And so in a lot of cases, when parents are put in this pressure position of having to pick one or the other, they will choose to cut off the penis or the ambiguous genitalia and we're just going to raise them as female. And then they get to a certain point and they're like, but I'm not female. I am, however they identify, but that's actually happened a lot. There was actually a Law and Order SVU episode that was based on that with twins. And at the time, I saw that episode forever ago before I was ever doing this work or having these kinds of conversations. But I think about it because it was like this person was raised as a female, as a girl, and actually put in these very horrible therapy sessions of trying to convince them that they were a girl, and inside they were not. Okay, so y'all see this. You see gender identity, gender expression, physical attraction, sex assigned at birth. Now, I came up with a really easy way, I think it's easy, that's me talking, to identify the difference between those things. And I call it, think about the pants, okay? So your gender identity is how you feel about what is in your pants. So you were born with a penis, you identify as a man, you are cisgender, that's your gender identity. If you were born with a penis, but you identify as a woman, that is trans. So cis is same, trans different, that's your gender identity. Your gender expression is how you wear your pants. Now, if I'm a feminine woman and I wear, blue jeans and my hat backwards, that is a more masculine representation than when you might see me wearing a dress. Also, femme presenting people have a much easier time going back and forth with that fluidity with their gender expression. Sex assigned at birth is what is in your pants. So what is between your legs that you were assigned at birth. And then the physically attracted is whose pants do you want to get into? So you have identity, how you feel about your pants, expression, how you wear your pants, sex assigned at birth, what is in your pants, and then who are you physically attracted to is whose pants you want to get into. How do y'all feel about that? Okay. Good.
You made me
So
laugh out loud. That's how I feel.
good. Okay. So that is why
I think I would like to ask a question or
Yeah.
how you would explain this, because what you're talking about is really helpful, and it's a helpful explanation on a topic that asking questions may not feel very comfortable. But there was a time period where being, where someone may have said that they were born attracted to the same sex, that was part of what was born, the feelings since birth. And that was a there were times when I think it was, you can't change, you're not changing people. This is how they were born. But in listening to your explanation or how you're explaining it, I'm not opposed to anyone wanting to decide. Has that viewpoint changed with the conversation that you're having around fluidity and if how people feel or who they determine who they want to be in a relationship with?
And if I don't answer your question, say that. But what I think is that people have a harder time with people saying that they knew that they were gay, for instance, from the time they were very young. You know what I'm saying? So we live in this very heterocentric society. It's very hetero. And by that, what I mean is, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not, the vast majority of people that I work with say this is exactly right. Whenever you walk into a room, you assume that everyone in that space is straight until you're told otherwise. Okay. That is the world. Like that, what I've determined that has helped me the most with this work, when I walk into a room, I assume everyone in there is queer until I'm told differently. And so when and I even did that with all the white cops on Monday, and I told them I did it. I was like, when I walk in, I was like, every single one of y'all are queer until I learn differently. And that helps me to use the most respectful and inclusive and neutral language that I can. I think that it's like, because of society and because of the way that we were raised, it's kind of like, you're like, I never knew that I was straight. I'm assuming, I'm just saying, like, if you're straight, Amy, you know, when you're younger, like, you never really gave much thought to if you were straight or not, if you were straight. But because that's what you see all around you, that's what you see on television. It's like not the norm to see these same sex, same gender type relationships. And so I think that kids that already notice a difference, they're like looking around trying to find something that looks like what they feel on the inside to
Yeah.
be their truth. And they don't see it anywhere, unless you go to a very special channel or something, or it's, you know, RuPaul's Drag Race, which is not even talking about sexual orientation. That's all about gender identity. So I don't know that I'm answering your question, but what I think is that it's a lot easier for people to, or acceptable for people to say that they're straight when they're younger and then sort of like explore later, than for them to be able to say that they're queer when they're younger and be supported in that identity. I don't know.
Okay. And maybe that is something that when you were talking, you were making another point, and maybe I maybe the point is the perception of, you know, being a lesbian and then going back or then, you know, becoming and how the world might view that, like, oh, that's interesting versus men and the gender differences. And maybe that's what you were talking about. And I heard it differently. I just wanted to make sure that in my approach, I don't assume anything about anybody. Well, that's not true, but I mean, you know, completely. But I walk into the room and think that there's individuals in there, and whatever they're about is what they're about. And having that characteristics in my interacting with people, not assuming something about someone, but I wanted to make sure that I'm addressing this. And I think the way you framed it, at least for me, I'm going to take away that you talked about having this open dialogue of not these things being new, but them never having a definition.
Right.
And that was really, that was that was a way to state that was clear, precise, and made sense to me.
Excellent. I'm sorry. I need like this is the 5th time my kid's called. I need to make sure he's not dying. So can I have like literally 10 seconds?
Absolutely.
Hello?
Hold on. Let me put you on mute so I don't hear you cuss out your kid. There you go. So first of all, one of the things that is kind of one of the more powerful ideas that are being expressed today and how it's helping me is this notion of categories versus continuum, right? And so what I'm finding in this whole understanding of fluidity and the importance of fluidity and kind of what that means for the conversations that we're holding. And what I'm finding is that what Leslie is providing with all of her funny stories as well to kind of help illustrate the point is the fact that we are, or many of us rather, I'll share it that way, are finding our way in one, understanding what the language means and how to incorporate the language thoughtfully, and that's almost like it's a muscle that has never needed to be utilized before. And part of what it is that we're doing is beginning the efforts in how we utilize it. So when she shared that what she does is she goes in with an assumption, that's her filter of that flips the script, I think as Jarnay, I think as Christine mentioned, right? That kind of flips the script, so to speak, but it's a way of being sure that she is absolutely intentional with the way she approaches language that is purely unconscious for most of us. right? And that's kind of what it is, and one of the ideas that I'm getting and I'm gathering from this. And I'm wondering what big ideas, quote unquote, are you getting from this conversation? And if you wouldn't mind, put that in the chat, or put that, or you can share it audibly. All right. What ideas are of import and have that you're taking away from the conversation thus far? And Amy, you can go ahead. I can hear
I'm
you.
going to go, and I know people don't want to listen to me, but it's actually, this is what I'm thinking of with this is the term happy holidays, and how some people get mad about saying happy holidays. And as a person that celebrated Christmas my entire life, I do walk into a room and assume everybody celebrates Christmas. I have gone to work and given out gifts to people that were, and I made Christmas ornaments, and somebody said, I've never had one before. And so, yeah, like, it's just, that is something that is just my background. It's who I am. But thinking about it from the perspective of happy holidays, not taking away, but making sure that the language is open enough or universal enough, I guess, that it doesn't have that assumption, is just spot on. It just changed some of looking at that for me, and I enjoyed that. That's all I have.
Well, I think, and I'm gonna add real quick, and then we can go back to it, but, you know, in working with children, it was always, all right, guys, let's go do this, or all right, gals, let's go do this. And I've moved away from that to, okay, friends, let's go here.
Or y'all. I use y'all
Or
all
y'all, but we don't have the same y'all drag, so, you
the
know.
time.
But that's, I think it's critical on how we refer, even, you know, in the preschool ages, because you don't know what they have been exposed to or how they perceive things. And if they question at that young of an age what they're experiencing. So, you know, just throwing that out there. I agree with Amy on the whole happy holidays thing. So it's really how tunnel vision you have and how we can open that up.
And part of what it is that I'm getting and continually working on myself with respect to is first and foremost recognizing that I had tunnel vision and have some tunnel vision issues and challenges that I'm working through, and these kind of conversations help me to expand my vision, so to speak, or what I allow in, or what I take in, or how I express myself. And being more and more intentional about being thoughtful and respectful is kind of the opportunity that this is providing. And so some of it is a little bit challenging only because it's new, but it's also, and it challenges the way I've always been brought up and all the stuff that I got, you know, with me, but it's part of the challenge. And so thank you for some of those tools. I'm really interested in others and what you all are getting from this.
And thank you all for your grace. By the 5th call, I was like, has somebody lost a finger? You know, I'm at work. Like, what is happening here? But the crisis averted. So thank you for your flexibility on that. I was like, I can't.
I just want to share that I'm just really appreciative. I feel like you expanded my insight. I feel like I have had a lot of experience, and I knew a lot. I did not know a lot of what you shared today. The intersex is huge for me to understand that. And I never want to specify anyone. So I wasn't really sure about that approach. So that was very engaging. And also the application of it, and how you approach it, just how you talk, it makes me feel more comfortable. Not that I have anything to be uncomfortable about. I just want to make sure I don't hurt anybody's feelings. And I'm very dry. And so I have to be very careful and aware of how I say things. And so that's really how you helped me today. Thank you for the information.
I
Thank you for
appreciate that. I appreciate the compliment. And I think that saying things in like very plain, I saw a quote the other day and I'm gonna totally mess it up, but it was basically to the effect of if you can't say things in a plain and simple way, you probably don't understand them very well. And so what that brings me back to is all of the times that I've sat in sessions where somebody was using words that I didn't understand and like it was so just like clinical, and it's like, no, but like we're working with these people all the time, and like how, how do we best serve them? And like I just think that breaking it down, and also breaking it down by lived experience, and I say that, the assumption that everyone is straight until proved otherwise, that's who I was. Like I was, I actually I actually stuck my foot in my mouth with my mentor, who's now married to her wife of 10 years. And I remember walking with her to class one day and I was like, hey, have you been dating any new guys? Like I didn't know anything about her personally. And maybe she did date guys then, I don't know, but what I know now is like I immediately thought back to like, that was like I just assumed because of the way she looked and dressed and spoke, and that doesn't tell you anything about anyone, especially when it comes to their gender or sexual preference or any of those things. So we don't have a ton of time left. I'm going to see what, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carlton.
I was just going to say, is there one other closing idea? And what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll move this to, we will continue with the next conversation that we're going to have and just continue with it. Because what I'm finding is that this series is just one fluid conversation that we're continuing to have. And
It
so,
is. So yes, and I've got like a little 5-minute video that I wanted y'all to watch. So what I'm going to do is just get the links together. Carlton, I will like just like the links and like have everything like spelled out so it's easy to just push on and share to everyone, because I've already got everything pulled up, so it's a simple email. I can do it like as soon as we sign off here. But what I would like to say is that when it comes to pronouns, the most difficult one in my experience is using they and them as a singular pronoun. It's been done for hundreds of years, but people I think it's more of that like pushback on like, why does it need to be they, them, why, whatever. My partner, who is a person who outwardly has all the privileges, he was listening to me do one of these conversations one day and he couldn't wait for me to get off because he was like, this they, them, you can't use they, them as a singular pronoun. And I was like, oh, but you can. Let me provide you with an example. I was like, if you were to tell me that you were bringing a friend over to our home for dinner and I didn't know their gender, I would say, oh, what time are they going to be here? They. It's still single. It's still, the whole idea of this, it's the hardest one for me. And I work with a person, I was just meeting with them a little while ago. They are very feminine presenting. If you walk past them on the street, you would absolutely, without a doubt, say she, her. It is they, them pronouns. And that one's the hardest for me is seeing someone who looks, and this is me, this is what society tells me, they look this way. So clearly they are this thing. And it's just kind of like reprogramming ourselves to sort of get away from those things that we assume about people. So I'll leave it there.
Did you want to share the video or no?
No, I'll share the link because I know last time we ended up keeping people over like a whole lot. And I want to be respectful of people's time because we've already been together for 90 minutes now. But I will absolutely send it. And it's really good. I mean, it's 5 minutes. It's produced by MTV. There's a very gender neutral, gender fluid human who's saying the things, but I found it to be informative. And I just saw it for the first time like 5 or 6 months ago. And so I feel like if I find it informative, y'all might find it informative.
Phenomenal. Well, first of all, could you all just help me thank Leslie for a remarkable conversation? You can kind of put it in your reactions or just give her a clap. Thank you so very, very much, Leslie. This has been extraordinarily helpful for us all. I'd also want to share with you that we're going to be back here on February 15th. I think the timing is the exact same time. We're going to be, it's a 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time that we're here. Please Let your colleagues know, let the community members that you think this would be relevant for know and understand they're all open, they're all welcome. Christine will likely get the information out to you all very, very shortly with respect to the registration link. There will be, you will receive the information with respect to the video recording of this session, as well as all of the resources that are associated with this. This is the beginning of conversations. This is not the totality of conversations, but thank you all for joining us for this particular conversation. Christine, I'm going to give you the last word and then we're out.
I think much gratitude goes out to Carlton and Leslie. This is something I think we as professionals all need to know the most up-to-date verbiage and how we can be socially inclusive of everybody that we come into contact with. And I found it very educational. Again, I come from that Catholic upbringing where this is all taboo to me. So, you know, Tom and I joke all the time, we're taking, you know, our prevention and we're kind of breaking that box, and there's no longer that conceived notion of a box. And I think this falls right into line with what we're trying to do, not only as our organization, but with all the organizations we work with. As always, if you guys have any input, please feel free to reach out to me on how we can make this training better. If you think we need to get the times closer together so there's not such a gap, any input that you have for me is very valuable, and I will float it up the chain to everybody else. So thank you again, and we will see you not maybe at Kayaka, but those of you, find me if you're going to be there, and we will see you on the 15th.
I'll be at CADCA.
I'll be at CACTA. If you're coming, come on down and join us. We're going to have a good time. Thank you all, everybody. Take care, and looking forward to seeing you next time. See you, Amy. See you, Rochelle. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Tom.
Carlton, do you need me at all before I sign off, or Christine?
Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Where are you?